Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight's conversation is going to focus on COVID-19, also known as the coronavirus. Right now, this has been termed as a pandemic by the World Health Organization. And in Rwanda, we have a registered number of 40 cases that have tested positive for the virus so far. This conversation tonight is going to focus, number one, on how Rwanda is prepared from a regional perspective to deal with this pandemic, as well as look at how Rwandans in the diaspora are faring abroad and what measures have been put in place to take care of Rwandan citizens in the diaspora. My name is Dana Mpisi, and joining this show, we have with us people, our guests who are online, obviously for various reasons, who are not in studio. And I'll start with the first guest, who is with us tonight, Minister of State Olivier Nduhungirehe, Minister of East African Community at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Relations. Minister Olivier, great to have you on The Square.
Thank you for inviting me to this first social distancing show of The Square.
Thank you very much. We're also joined with us with Mathilde Mutakanhabana, who is the U.S. ambassador, Rwandan ambassador to the U.S. Ambassador Mathilde, thank you for tuning into The Square tonight.
Thank you so much, Diana. My name is Mukanhabana.
Mukanhabana, yes. Thank you very much. And then we are also joined with us by Joel Ndoli Pierre, who is joining us as a diaspora member. He's based in Belgium. Joel, thank you for tuning into The Square.
Thank you very much, Diana.
Great. Before we kick off, I would like to also introduce the resident panelists on the show. Brenna Namata, great to have you on The Square.
Thank you, Dana.
And Charlie Haber, resident panelist, great to have you on the show.
Same here, Dana. How are you?
Good. Before we start, if you can briefly tell us, how has the social distancing been like for you, Charles?
Well, first of all, as Ambassador Nduhungirehe has said, it's the first show that we are actually having social distancing in two different formats. Some are very many miles away, seas away, and even the way we are seated here is quite easily more than a meter. And it's a great experience. But I want to also just briefly talk about my last 5 days in quarantine and staying. And let me not call it a quarantine because I'm not in any quarantine.
Social distancing.
Yes. Experience of staying at home. Never did I ever know that a 3-bedroom house is a huge mansion.
Yeah.
I live in a very expanse area, and I actually did not know until COVID-19 pandemic that there are very many things to do in my home. Right. So it's a huge, it's a fantastic experience.
But I'm sure you're bonding with your family more than ever.
Of course, bonding with the family, and it's getting to know a few things that need to be fixed, keeping fit.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, actually working more than I work when I'm in the office.
That's how it is when you work from home. Brenna, how's social distancing been for you?
It's busy. It's busy. I hate it that I have to work from home because home is where I'm supposed to go and feel at home and rest and not be working.
Yes.
But I have to work. And also because I wasn't really prepared for it. So the internet is slow. You have to struggle. Some people want to watch television. Others want to eat, so yeah.
It's interesting. Well, to our viewers, I hope you are staying home, staying safe, and washing your hands as we really put in measures as a country to slow down and really halt the prevention of this virus spreading. So the first point of this discussion is going to go to Minister Olivier Nduhungirehe, and it's to do with understanding Rwanda's preparedness, at least from a regional perspective, and also in your capacity, Minister of State in charge of the East African community. So we know that we are on a national lockdown. Schools have been suspended, gatherings also not prohibited, such as churches, as well as movement of people. But on a regional level, if you could share with us, Honourable Minister, Rwanda's preparedness as a member of state in the East African community in dealing with COVID-19, especially with regards to movement of goods across the region.
Thank you very much. COVID-19 is a pandemic, as you said, It's a global crisis, and countries have taken measures, preventive measures, to stop this virus from further spreading. But now we live in communities, in regional economic communities, and Rwanda is a member of the East African Community, where we are bound by treaties and protocols, including the protocol on common market and free movement of people, goods, services, and capital. So then we had to have a regional approach. And today, actually this afternoon, we had a meeting on a video conference, a joint meeting of Sectoral Council of Ministers of Health and ministers in charge of East African Community, where we discussed all these issues, and we adopted a joint statement which contain many things. First, we emphasize on those preventive measures. You know that we have now stopped the meetings, face-to-face meetings of the East African Community. So we are now favoring those new technology and video conference, Skype and others. And then we have decided, which is actually in implementation already, on the screening, 100% screening, exit and entry screening of everybody crossing the border. And another decision is to implement the quarantine, mandatory quarantine for all travelers across the region. So those are decisions that were taken, and then we took other decisions related to trade, as you said in your question. We have decided that for trucks and vehicles crossing the border, we should not have more than 2-3 crew members, and all of them will be screened. And if some show symptoms of that virus, that COVID-19 virus, they will of course be quarantined, and the vehicle and the trucks will be decontaminated. And then the owner of the truck or the operator of the truck will send, if possible, backup crew. So, and then for those decisions were taken to facilitate trade, the free movement of goods, services in this crisis of this health crisis, because we can't afford having a shortage of goods in this community, because we have 6 partner states. Among those 6, 4 are landlocked, so they need still the free movement of goods and services. We took also other decisions related to facilitating our nationals stranded in the community, to facilitate them to get to their final destination, and to encourage research through our East African Health Research Commission, and other decisions. But the main one are those I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Charles Brenner, is there something you'd like to add or ask on this topic of regional preparedness and Rwanda's position?
One thing that comes to my mind is the regional meeting is coming a bit too late, and I wonder why. Maybe if the minister could clarify that, because did it have to get to many cases that we take action?
Mm-hmm. Honourable Minister, did you hear that? Did you get that?
Actually, the decision was not taken today to suspend, because the decision says that we resolve to maintain the suspension of EAC regional face-to-face meetings. This decision actually was requested by Rwanda, as chair of the East African Community, a few weeks ago, that all meetings of the East African Community, including the summit that was scheduled next month, should be suspended until further notice, and then we should use video conference as much as we can. So this decision, this communique, joint statement, was just meant as to emphasize the decision that was already taken.
Charles?
Right. I really don't have any question to ask. I think it's just something to note. It's my worry really comes around the cohesion and the uniformity in approach. Because if you look at the media reports and follow what especially mainstream media report across the different countries, you look at Rwanda's vigilance and the steps being taken. I'm also happy that Uganda, at least the intention is in the right direction. Whether the implementation is like that is probably a different story, but the intention and the aggression is in the right direction. Kenya, same story. You get extremely concerned when, the president of Tanzania comes up and says, we believe in God, which is a very, very good thing. We all do believe in God. And he says, for that matter, we don't think Corona will enter churches and mosques, so you can continue converging in as many numbers as you'd like to be. Burundi comes up and says, no, for us, I think those are diseases of other people. They don't affect us in any way whatsoever. And it's extremely concerning that there is no oneness in the voice as far as the region is concerned, and that spells doom to me.
Yeah. And Honorable Minister, just before Brenna weighs in, yes, just to build on what Charles is saying, we are talking about Rwanda's preparedness within the region, but, how does it work if different parts or different member states of the region, at least in the East African community, have a slightly different approach, actually maybe even a radical approach to what we are doing in Rwanda in terms of lockdown, in terms of communiques to the public and informing them as much as possible? How do we work together, regionally speaking, if other countries, have a sort of different approach to this virus?
Yes, this is what I was saying in the beginning. Countries in the world are taking decisions, preventive measures that are different. We as a community have decided to come together and then at least to reach a consensus on a few measures we can agree on. We discussed it this afternoon. There are countries that took more drastic measures than others, but as we have now the free movement of people, goods, and services in this community, we need to agree on a few measures, basic measures, including the screening, systematic screening of exit and entry when there are people or goods crossing the border, and also the measure of quarantining people, all travelers in the community. But of course, countries are still sovereign to take decisions regarding this virus, but we know that this pandemic is evolving, and we can expect that decisions taken by partner states will also evolve accordingly.
Brenna, is there something you wanted to add?
I think that we would like to see more from the region. Beyond statements around regional trade. And I think it remains the biggest issue with our integration process, that as long as we continue to prioritize trade over lives, we'll continue to get it wrong. Because if the ministers are sitting today and taking decisions, yes, around screening, but clearly you can see most people are worried about trade, I think we have a problem.
What would you rather have?
Right from the beginning,
yes,
we should have prioritized people, the safety of our people as a region. So if Rwanda was taking measures, we should have seen the region at least reacting to what Rwanda is doing. We haven't seen that until cases have come to the region. And I think it's very selfish. So if we're at the moment talking about trade, it's because the biggest traders maybe in the region are suddenly looking at this thing and saying, okay, it's affecting us. Yeah, so the approach has to change. Safety first.
Of citizens.
Yeah.
We are going to just... Ambassador, do you want to respond to that before we go to... Sorry, Minister, do you want to respond to that before we go to our ambassador in the U.S.?
Yes, thank you. Actually, in joint statement that we issued today, the first 3 paragraphs are about the health and health of our citizens, the citizens of East Africa, the screening, the quarantine, the ending the face-to-face meetings. Those are decisions related to the health of citizens of East African community. But of course, East Africa is also about free movement of goods and services. And there are countries that rely on that free movement of goods and services. So it is important that while we are strengthening measures to protect the health of our citizens, we ensure that there is no shortage of goods in this community. Otherwise, there will be a situation that will not be good for our citizens, because most of us depend on those goods that are coming on the seaport of Mombasa and Dar es Salaam. So it is important to have both issues at heart, protecting the citizens, but also ensuring that there is a facilitation of trade within that. Within those measures, preventive measures that we adopted today.
We're now going to go to our ambassador in the US, Mathilde Mukan-Hawana, who is here with us, and we just want to have an understanding. You know, we've talked about Rwanda's preparedness and understanding how we are working as part of a region. Ambassador, yes, thank you for joining in. If you can tell us about what Rwanda is doing to take care of its citizens abroad in the face of COVID-19. Globally, we have over 378 deaths to date, and 378 coronavirus infections have been recorded, and the death toll globally is over 16,000. If you can give us a snapshot of what, at least in the US, where you're ambassador, what's being done to help Rwandans who in the face of COVID-19?
Thank you so much. Here in the United States, we are relying on our community. As soon as the coronavirus started to affect many states in the United States, as you know, probably that all the 50 states are affected, but some states more than others. There are about 3 that are highly affected, New York, California, and Washington State. We started to speak to our constituents. We have United States Rwanda community abroad that is well constituted, and we are in constant contact. And we always come together, whether it's on conference call, we have retreats, many retreats, but also with our communities, Rwanda community abroad, that are about 27 constituted in the whole United States. So we had a conference call, and we came up with an agreement on how we can deal with the coronavirus. One was to establish an advisory on how we, it's written on our webpage, but also on the one for the Rwanda and US. But also we put the hotlines, one from the community and one from the United States, from the Rwanda Embassy. And those are used for emergency purposes. In essence, what we did was also to account for all the Rwandans in all those jurisdictions I was talking about, in all the RCAs. So the last conference we had, we were able to account for all the RCAs or the Rwandans who are in those communities, and we were able to establish that at least they were not affected so far with, aside from how other people are affected, but no one was deeply affected, at least on a medical basis, with the coronavirus. We had one case in New York, but a mild case. So that's what we did. And then we also took the measures to see how we can assist the people. We spoke to our students. We gave them advice to stay on their campuses. Some of them are open for international students who are unable to join their families. There are parents who came to pick up their children. There are other ones who join the communities. But our homes are open for anyone who isn't accounted for. That's why we had to talk to the community to be able to know who the students are, but also to reach out to the concentration of students, like the ones who are in Nebraska, the ones who are on a bridge to Rwanda, many students who are in the United States. So that's what we have done, but now the community has moved to do even more. We are trying to see how we can help the people who are affected, either financially or in other ways with the coronavirus. As you know very well, there are people who lost their employment, who go from paycheck to paycheck. So we are looking at the mechanism to raise funds like the ones we use for Connect Rwanda or other things, many initiatives that the community can do. And then see how we can also assist the ones waiting for instance, the unemployment check. You know that this country has attributed, now they were able to agree on $2 trillion, and some of it will be used also to help the people who are going to lose their jobs. But as a community, that's what we are doing. We have many projects communities have embraced, including accounting for all the older people in their communities, be able to go and buy them groceries or even to know how they are doing. But also thinking in terms of psychological connections. All this thing about being isolated for many people is the first in their lives, but it can be a good thing or a bad thing depending upon how you treat it, because this is in times like that people really come up with answers. Just like the Great Depression, games were created and many things were created. But you can imagine, for instance, if you are on a campus, you are a student, you are an international student, and other students have left. They went to their families. So it's not an easy situation. That's why we need to go beyond just taking care of tangible things, but also psychological and many different things. We are talking, last night, for instance, we had a major conference call thinking on how we are going to lead the commemoration. And those are things that we say we need to keep. And we started to use the virtual reality like the one we are using now to see how we can do it in various communities as well. So maybe I can answer it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think as the show goes on, we'll be hearing from at least our viewers, especially on social media. But it's good to see that at least the embassy is not only taking care of tangible issues, but also mental health. And I think some of the questions that are going to come up, especially to do with students, these higher education universities that have just closed, students have been given less than a week to find, their bearings, and we'd be keen to know what the embassy is doing for some of these students. Brenna and Charles, based on what the ambassador said, is there something like you'd like to add or questions in terms of Rwandans in the diaspora and what our missions are doing to take care of them?
I have no questions, but really just the timing is just not too great. Well, I don't think there's anything like a good timing for a pandemic. But Ambassador Matilda talked about genocide commemoration around the corner. There's Easter. Kids were at school. So it's just extremely unfortunate. But she also says something about the natural lifestyle of the diaspora. And I know for several decades there has been talk around how the Rwanda Global Diaspora Network, I think it's called RDG, and that's the acronym, can set up a fund, or if they have ever set up a fund, I don't know whatever came of it, to be able to support each other under such times. I know there is huge remittance that comes into the Rwandan economy, but in times like this, when the guys who survive on hourly jobs, the nature of jobs out there is, you feed off what you've earned by the hour or by the day. For that matter, majority of the jobs, not many of them are fortunate enough to have contract jobs. salaried employees. So it must be extremely tough for them, and I think it's going to be a huge test for especially the Rwanda Global Diaspora Network, and it's a huge test for its fragility or its strength to see how they are going to be a true force. For the government of Rwanda, it's a lot easier because there's a mechanism. There's a Ministry of Local Government. There's always, mechanisms in which they can support their people. But what about the diaspora network? I think it's a huge test for them. And something else that comes into my mind is some of them, if you look at the countries that have been worst hit, like
China, for instance.
China,
right?
Italy. I have many friends in Italy whom we keep chatting with. The US, the numbers are rising. In the UK, they've gone into a lockdown right now. I hope there's a plan for, especially from the RDGN, but I think this is the right time that we really need to test these institutions.
Ambassador, if you can just comment a bit more on the Rwanda Diaspora Global Network. Is it actually functional? Is it working during in the face of this pandemic, at least in the US?
In the US, I would say that it's really the US RCA more than the RDGN right now. I think they might be connecting maybe on ideological basis, but not really in reality. The US RCA in the United States has created an NGO, pretty much a non-profit organization, for them to have the possibility to raise funds by using the mechanism in the United States, and that's what they are doing. They are readying themselves to do that. But as far as RDGN is concerned, I wouldn't be able to comment on that in terms of connection. I've been mostly focusing on the USRCA here. I think that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is in a better place to tell us about RDGN because it's under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Ambassador. Actually, I'd like to go back to Minister Nduhungirehe. If he can share with us, recently we saw some tweets of a young man who was flown back to Kigali using international flights. I think you saw that on Twitter in the face of COVID-19. Can you shed more light on that? Are we actually flying back Rwandan citizens back to Rwanda from wherever they are internationally?
As you know, we took a decision a few days ago to suspend all commercial passenger flights. And because of this decision, there were a number of Rwandans in transit or who were in different countries to visit their children, their friends who were stranded there. So we had to connect those Rwandans with the nearest embassy so that they can assist them. And also we gave them a phone number here in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs so that we can assist them because we have a number of them. And now we had a few flights recently. There is a flight of KLM and also of Qatar Airways that were flying, I think, even today, if I'm not mistaken. And we have a number of Rwandan citizens who took those flights and then who came back to Rwanda. But of course, we still have a number of Rwandans here and there who are stranded because of this situation, and we are assisting them as much as we can.
Thank you very much. I think do you want to add something? We'd like to also hear from an experience of a Rwandan member of the diaspora. He's based in Belgium. And Joël Ndori-Pierre, if you can join us, just to share with us your experience so far in dealing with COVID-19 away from home. I know you moved to Brussels a couple of years back, having been in Rwanda for a while, and before that actually in Brussels. So, what is the experience like, on a personal level for you, your family, and other members of Rwanda in the diaspora?
Yeah, thank you, Diana. So it's been now 13 days that we are at home. So it's been quite long so far. So the experience is that we really need to be creative, especially for the kids. And thankfully, we got some good guidance and you know, activities to do from schools. And then we try to organize our day and make sure that the kids are not spending all the time in front of the TV. Because the difference that we have here is that, I mean, maybe it's sunny out there, but it's still a bit cold. So we cannot spend the whole day in the garden, for example. So we need to find different activities, either cooking, playing with the kids, but also trying also to find time to go outside and take a bit of air.
So it's you seem to be doing well, basically.
I would like to say so, but yeah, I mean, we are trying to organize ourselves. My advice is really to make sure that you keep like a good agenda of your day, and then you try to be creative with the kids. But I mean, it's also scary on other hands, because we have you have daily figures of you know, new cases in Belgium. We are close to 5,000 today. We also have the death toll. It's 172 as of today. So, you know, it's not. It's also a difficult situation on that side, because we need still to go to the pharmacy or to buy some foods, and it's always you know, a big question I mean, a big decision actually to take, and are we safe to go there? So and also on another hand, when you have to explain to the kids the situation where they cannot go back to school, what is this virus about? So they're also asking, when are we going back to school? When is it going to stop this? So it's you talk earlier about the mental health, or the mental aspect. That's something that we need to manage as much as we can, especially after 13 days.
And how long what's the situation like in your city? I assume you're in Brussels. Is it lockdown everywhere, and for how long?
So here in Belgium, there was the first decision was taken on the 12th of March, and then they did an update last week. Initially, they were supposed to stop this measure on the 3rd of April. Now they move it to the 5th, and by end of this week on Friday, there will be a National Security Council to give new decision if they are actually extending, or if they are maybe either respecting the first deadline or giving a new date. So the situation is that we cannot go out of our home only just to go to pharmacy or to buy food, and also we cannot be more than 2 persons. We have to respect also a distance of 1.5 meters. For example, in the pharmacy, you cannot. It's only one client at a time. In the supermarkets, you have actually a limited time. You cannot spend more than 30 minutes within the shop, and then you also have restriction on the quantity of good that you are buying. Because when the decision was announced 2 weeks ago, there was actually those different shops were completely attacked by the population. They were actually taking whole the pastas, for example, or other stuff, and then so they now put some restriction on the quantity that you are taking. The problem is the problem is not the fact that there is a shortage in terms of stock. It's really to make sure that we can, if someone is coming later on, that they can find what is looking for. So that's pretty much the situation.
Joël, Charles, Barna, would you like to add on the experiences of a brother in Brussels?
No, not me.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Joel. I think we are going to go quickly to our Twitter feed. Unless there's some comments on the general topic, Charles and Brenna, you'd like to add before we read from our viewers?
I wanted to comment on his observation.
Whose observation?
Charlie's observation, because he thinks that government has an easy job compared to the people in the diaspora. And I'll tell you, I doubt that there are government officials who are having a good night's sleep.
No, it was comparatively, because the government of Rwanda is the institutions that are capable of stepping in. That's the point I was making. The point was not to say that they have an easy job. They have an extremely surmountable task, but the diaspora have no plan. That's the point I was raising.
I mean, even for the diaspora, it is the government here that they expect to give guidance. As you heard, they're taking instructions from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And citizens all over will always look up to their government.
In times like this. So let's just quickly hear from our viewers. We have the first tweet for tonight, and this tweet is from Frank. And Frank states that, while our diaspora is important, let's examine the impact of this lockdown in the country so far. What can we do to help those in need? The impact and how we should get prepared if the lockdown continues after the initial 14 days. We are stronger. Together we shall overcome. Before we go to our next tweet, Brenna and Charles, I just want to check in with you. Do you think this lockdown will last more than 14 days, based on what the trends you've been seeing with the virus? What are your thoughts on this? As well as ideas on how we can come as communities to do better, to give back, especially for low-income earners, who I think are being hit the hardest by this pandemic. What are your thoughts on that?
I think definitely it will take longer, especially because if we look at the cases, they're rising because we already have people inside and they're doing the testing. So probably we'll have more cases tonight or the next day, but not because there are people coming from the outside, but because there are people they've been following up on for the last couple of weeks. So we'll expect to see that. And if you want to thoroughly do a good job, I think you still want to make sure that people are in one place, stay home and stay safe. And this is because even when you still have people in isolation, we still have people that are not taking it seriously. That we still have people that feel that it's a time to check on your old friends. They're not taking it as serious as it should be. Yet when we look around us, cases are going up. It's actually worrying, especially with the region. For a couple of weeks, everybody thought Africa was kind of immune, and there was this myth going around that the shocks will not be as such. And the reality is now, coming to the fore. So if you're in position of government, I think you want to actually make sure that by the time you say we are good, we're actually good. Yeah, so I expect it to take longer. In terms of the impact, again, the people at the Ministry of Finance, I don't know what they have to do, because just a couple of weeks ago, they had already presented the supplementary budget. I am not sure that budget had accounted for these shocks. So that's, of course, going to become increasingly difficult, where the resources are going to come from. But I feel that our private sector could do more. We are seeing that the government is doing everything it can to help and support. But our private sector, on the other hand, seems to be kind of waiting for the decision on the government side. And what do I mean by this? For instance, the breweries who have alcohol that could be converted into hand sanitizer. Yes, and corporates could come in and put wash handing stations, because we have people right now that do not have water, that do not have soap. Corporates can do that, So I feel that we shouldn't wait for government to solve everything. We should try within our small means, wherever you were, and try to make a difference. And I think we can. But instead, what we're seeing is the private sector is now saying, oh, look at the shocks, we need tax breaks, we need, yeah, fine, we'll talk about the tax breaks, but you also have to take some bit of responsibility, I think, yeah. So I'm challenging our corporates. Let them do something. We need Rwandans to access soap. We need Rwandans to access water. I mean, WASAC has its own challenges, but if we have the corporates come in and be able to at least provide community washing stations, I mean, something can be done.
Charles, what are your thoughts?
I think two things. Maybe as the Square, we should be fair to our viewers and let them know that this is going to be a multi-pronged topic, and we will discuss different facets of the impacts of COVID-19. The point that Frank was raising, that yes, the diaspora is good, but there's also home. I think maybe it would be very nice to reassure them that
absolutely this is a series of many conversations on the topic. Yes,
that's one. Secondly, I think Bana does raise a very, very pertinent question around corporate social responsibility and what can be done. With the exception of the banks that have come up to say, yes, we will give waivers, we will defer interest and principal, which is extremely good. The direct impact of that is that we have seen certain landlords beginning to listen to tenants' pleas. But, you know, Bana is extremely spot on. The rest of the other drive is Rwanda Revenue Authority saying pushing debts much further out. Central bank coming up with all these measures. So but you have the likes of Sulfo. Sulfo makes hand sanitizers. They make soap. What are they doing? So many people really need to come to come to the party especially in times like this. I don't know whether it happened to you today. Today was extremely one of the most frustrating days I've ever come across. The internet was bogus. Systems in the banks in terms of mobile banking were extremely frustrating. I couldn't pay online to renew my DSTV with all the payment platforms that are available. So these are worst times when you need things not to be working. In any case, you should expect these service providers to come up and say, and I hope the guys of Rural are listening to me, that we are not going to disconnect any services, for example. But let's make it easier for people to pay. But how is it that you disconnect and people are not even able to pay for their services? It's on the edge of testing people's patience. Yes.
This virus has hit the world, and I think everyone, countries, governments, institutions, are trying to wrap their head, around it. Things have come to a grinding halt. So I'm hoping that things will be better. Yes, very quickly.
I forgot to mention the churches.
Yes.
The churches can do more. There was a huge debate this week around some churches that are asking for tithe. Maybe they needed to help people. There are churches that they do a lot of fundraising on behalf of vulnerable people. But we also know that the church is very rich. They do have resources. So now is the time when we need to see the church also taking a lead and helping us.
I saw in the news that the Catholic Church, I don't know what part of it, actually gave back to community, 1.something million.
I know.
You're not talking about.
I'm Catholic.
Yes.
I'm Catholic.
Yeah.
And I know the Catholic Church can do more than that. Yeah.
Can I weigh in a little bit on that, if I may, Diana?
Yes.
I actually had a divergent opinion on Minister Bamhorichi's reaction, and I think also Minister Nduhungirehe reacted to that as well.
Yes.
I'm Anglican, and we were told that we can't go to church, but however we can continue doing our obligations, whether it is tithe or offering by mobile money, and they were given our accounts. I had no problem with that. That is fine. I think that especially ADEPER were quoted totally out of context, in my opinion. They were people continuing to do their usual obligations does not take away the responsibility of the church to serve its members.
So what you're saying in brief is that
they should, the way it came out.
They should continue collecting.
Yes, it's just fine. It's fine. No one is coerced.
But I like
no one is coerced.
I think it's the accountability.
Yes.
If the church is very clear that, look, we want to collect maybe 1 million to help maybe bring water to a certain part of Rwanda, then the members would know what they're collecting for. But sometimes it's just, you know, you're contributing and you don't even know whether the money actually...
Basically, I think the way you've challenged, your expectations of the corporate sector to come back and, really help with dealing with this is the same expectations of the churches.
Yeah, the church,
Last tweet before we finish and go back to our guests to have closing remarks for them is from Olivier, who says that the government has done its best to teach all citizens about how to stop the spread of COVID-19, but the enforcement is not done efficiently and Rwandans are not complying. As long as some still walk doing sport, we should not expect to eradicate the virus. So really, I think the message is compliance. It doesn't have to be through enforcement, rigid enforcement. Ideally, people should be able to comply. I just want to go back to our guests very quickly, and I'll start with the Honourable Minister Nduhungirehe. If you could just give us closing remarks, a closing message, as brief as possible on this topic tonight.
Thank you very much. My closing remarks actually are going along the last tweet. We need to follow instructions that were given by health authorities, especially the Ministry of Health. We are in a global crisis. It's a global economic shock. We need to take drastic measures, not for the pleasure of taking them, but to stop the spreading of this disease. And it is important that for all of us, that we understand that it's for our good. And in a few weeks, in a few months, we'll overcome. So it's important for all of us to continue to stay home first, to wash our hands, to have this social distancing, because it is the only way that we can stop the spreading of this virus. And then the government, of course, will continue its work of testing more and more people so that we ensure that we win against this enemy, this invisible enemy that is the coronavirus.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. I would like us to go to Ambassador Mathilde in the US. If you could give us closing remarks, very brief closing remarks.
Thank you so much. The only message maybe I can give is that, if anything, this virus has taught us that no one can do it alone. This is a collective effort, and we, as a community, as a government, we need to tackle it together and address and help the vulnerable ones among our midst. And that's what and the information, the shared information is key, especially during this particular time. I have to really commend our government and our people the way they have shared the information, because especially people in diaspora are reassured on how the government is handling it, and also it helps us even in the communities as we go through this virus together or this challenge together. But what I can insist upon is that collectively we can win. We can come up with responses that are going to address our communal issues. And I leave it here, but it was a privilege to be with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I would like to now go to Joël Ndori in Brussels, Belgium. Closing remarks, and thank you for sharing your experience under lockdown where you are and social distancing that you're doing with your family.
Yes, thank you, Diana. So my final remarks is just to say that I really encourage people to stay home. We have now we are at home since 13 days, and we are starting to see also the sign of those measures. I mean, when we look at the news, there are some figures that are actually providing good hope. Also, we learn on a daily basis that people in our, among our relatives or colleagues or friends are actually affected by this virus. It's a reality. It's not like some people that you don't know. We are starting to actually learn people close to us. And it's not only old people, it's young people as well. This virus is actually really killing. So please stay home.
Thank you very much, Joel. Thank you to our guests. I would like to just also turn to my resident panelists on the square for closing remarks. And indeed, like Joel said, this virus, I was on a chat today and someone said it is an equalizer. Rich, poor, male, female, educated, non-educated. We've just heard on the news today that Prince Charles tested positive for, the coronavirus. And so just really adhering to WHO and governments in different countries, adhering to the rules and really understanding the gravity of the spread and the impact this COVID-19 has on communities and societies. Charles, closing remarks?
Yeah, I think Joel has just said something that tickled my mind around collective responsibility, really, and there's just no two ways about it. We all have to understand that it all affects us. I am hoping that in this whole collective responsibility thing that first of all, we all understand that it's our responsibility and we do not need someone to bring a stick to remind us to remain indoors. And that said, in the recent past, there have been issues around our law enforcement and excessive use of force. I did follow in social media today 2 extremely unfortunate incidents. I hope the one in Nyanza of the shooting is not true. I saw a tweet from police saying it was actually not true. I also saw something else about hundreds of people who are being bundled into a police station because they have left their homes. So you're punishing people because they are not social distancing, and you're guiding them towards being very many people in one place. I think there is need for better coordination in the way we enforce the social distancing. Yes.
That's tough.
Yes, it is tough.
Yeah. Stay home, stay safe. I think it's putting not just yourself but the community first. Quite often as human beings we are very selfish in our decision making, but we have to realize that for every decision you make, it affects everybody around you. And the enforcement is going to have to be inevitable if people fail to use common sense, what you would think is common sense. So I think the powers that be, the powers that be have the responsibility to enforce if we are not taking the measures as serious as it should be. And I think it should go beyond the physical bit and the cost, because deploying costs money. Having people to run after us costs money. So someone has to be able to pay that cost. My very last point is on incentives. I think the government could provide some incentives for the private sector to take a lead on this. For instance, some tax credits, tax credits for an initiative, whether it is staff retention but some things could come up if the government comes up and provides some incentives to the private sector, because as we know, the private sector is always looking at the return for the shareholder. So how do you make them focus on your community and not the shareholder? I think
in addition to corporate social responsibility that they do on an annual basis, I think, and I really like your point, Berna, on challenging, and I know in other countries they've started, and I know in Rwanda it's actually in the pipeline. I think we're going to get an announcement from some corporates in these few coming weeks on initiatives to actually help, especially those mostly affected by this lockdown. But I really like your challenge to the private sector and the corporates to, step up and actually help contribute to government initiatives that are going on. Charles Brenner, always a pleasure to have you on the square. I'd like to also thank our guests, Honorable Minister, Ambassador Mathilde, as well as Joel. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining the show from your respective places across the globe. Thank you very much. And I would also like to just state, like Charles mentioned earlier, that this is a first part series of different discussions discussions we're going to have on the topic. Today we were looking at, Rwanda's regional position in dealing with this pandemic, as well as the toll it has taken on diaspora, members of the diaspora, Rwandan members of the diaspora. And what embassies are doing, but we're also going to be having, conversations to do with the impact of this on mental health, as well as looking at the economic impact as well of this pandemic in Rwanda. So keep your tweets going. Thank you very much for tuning in. Keep the conversation going. And yeah, I'd like to also thank our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee. Thank you for partnering in this square. And wherever you are, stay at home. Wash your hands, stay safe, and stay positive. Stay positive. Have a good night, and see you again next week.
bakundwa abana b'Imana abo mu muryango wa Evangelical Restoration Church Bible Communication Center ERC, namwe dusangiye kwizera mwese, ndetse nabo dusangiye gukunda igihugu cyacu, nabo dusangiye gukunda ubuzima, turabakangurira, turabasaba, turabinginze musigare mu ngo zanyu, musigare mu ngo zanyu, ntimugire aho mujya atari ku mpamvu zo kuramira ubuzima, naho ubundi musigare mu ngo zanyu. Mwumvire amabwiriza y'abayobozi b'igihugu ku neza yacu, kuko si igihano yewe si n'igifungo, ni ku neza yacu. Cyane cyane twebwe abizera duhamagariwe kuba urugero rwo kumvira. Hamwe tuzanesha pe, kuko nta na rimwe ikinyoma cyatsinze ukuri, nta na rimwe umwijima watsinze umucyo, nta na rimwe rwose inzoka yatsinze umwana w'Imana nzima. Hamwe tuzanesha. Tuzagerageza mu ruhande rwacu kubashikizaho amafunguro y'umwuka mu gitondo na ku mugoroba, tubikoreye hano mu rugo iwacu, kubabera urugero rwiza. Nta na hamwe amateraniro y'amasengesho yemerewe, yaba mu rusengero, yaba mu by'amasengesho, yaba mu bivumo n'ahandi hose. Rwose twumvire, ahubwo dushaka Imana mu ngo zacu, dutabariza Uwiteka, igisubizo kizava mu ijuru. Reka twese hamwe dufatanye dukora icyo Imana idusaba gukora, kandi kunesha ni kashi. Mu izina rya Yesu Kristo w'i Nazareti, amen and amen and amen.